Hello, this is Roland, and I wanted to stop by to make a little video. I'm currently on the air across the country and in Canada on 30 stations. And that's pretty good. I don't know how long I can keep it up. It's a real blessing. We'll hope and pray that I can maintain it. But I want to get the message out. And today I want to talk about intimidation. I want you to understand that the term original sin, you've heard that term, is a very real thing. And if I just say original sin, then you'll say, oh, okay, original sin. You won't understand what it means. But if I say to you intimidation, anything that intimidates you means that you are hypnotized or is hypnotizing you. Probably you're already hypnotized. See, it begins when we're little kids. People emotionalize you, they upset you, they scare you, they threaten you, they pressure you. And they establish ways of doing things that you're forced to do without understanding whether it makes sense or not. And they force you to do things that don't even make sense. Little kids are often forced to eat something that's weird. You know, cultural food or the family food, something really weird. And kids are forced to eat it. Even in the high chair, you see the little kid turning his or her face away. And anyway, kids are forced to eat something that's weird, and they won't eat it. Or they say, why? Or why do this? Why do you have to do this? Why are you asking me to do this? Well, because I said so. Now, you know, it's a little bit okay because parents are the authorities of the children. But it isn't long before when the child becomes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, the child begins to ask questions. Why this and why that? And those are very good. It's wonderful to ask questions. Usually the questions are just pushed aside or ignored. Or the child is given some kind of a answer that's not really an answer. But I want you to see that intimidation, when you are intimidated by something, you're subject to it. When you're intimidated by the boss, by the teacher, by the doctor, by the dentist, by some expert, by your overbearing mother, by your angry father, by your weird friend, by your cruel uncle or aunt, or by the babysitter, if you are intimidated, then it means you are subject to them. Do you understand? You feel a reluctance you're afraid to speak up. That's intimidation. And you know what that is? It's hypnosis. You walk into the boss's office, you're afraid to speak up. It means you're intimidated. And you have been intimidated. And it continues. And then when you meet somebody who's like your boss, or like your overbearing mother, or like your angry father, or like your cruel other brother, you feel intimidation, or you feel fear, or you feel anger, or resentment, plus intimidation. See, Christ said it so beautifully. He boiled it down into 5 words. So let me give you another example. Injustice. I want to read something from my book here. My book is called Waking Up from a Lifetime of Hypnosis. So I want to read you something from this book. I'm talking about a typical home, and I quote from my book here. It's an Alice in Wonderland world. All is upside down, and all is injustice. Talking about this home. Practically every home is ruled by a tyrant. For example, many a home is ruled by a self-righteous mom. She plays the role of suffering martyr, hating her weak husband for some mistake he has made years ago, and making the children knuckle under to her authority. How many of you had a mom that made you knuckle under? That's intimidation. But I want you to see that it's also injustice. If the husband becomes the tyrant, then again, wrong rules. That's another injustice. Even if the weak husband should restore order through anger, he looks bad. And in comparison, she looks like the suffering victim. She gathers the affection of the children that she has intimidated or she has fooled, and the support of social service and the courts, and the husband must bow to the authority or else be cast out. Such a home is injustice. It is the husband's fault for being weak, unaware, and selfish. Were the husband noble, wise, patient, strong, and have understanding, he would be in charge, ruling with wisdom and grace. In such a home, there would be no need to rebel, because his authority would be just and fair. So there is a form of injustice. The home where mother is ruling and she's manipulative and she hates her husband. See, there's something wrong about a mom who hates her husband. There's something wrong about a weak or absent husband. There's something wrong about a divorce, unless, of course, the partner is just a terrible, violent person, and sometimes you don't have any choice. But in general, most parents are halfway decent, and then they get divorced for some selfish reason. So the kids see that. It's an injustice. Dad is weak. Mom yells and screams at the kid and forces the kid to knuckle under her authority, and dad sits there, weak. Yes, dear. No, dear. It's injustice. Okay? And then there's all kinds of injustice in the home. If the parents are alcoholics or drug addicts or workaholics or impatient, or they're ambitious achievers and they force the child to be ambitious, it's all injustice. You're being forced to do something that is not just, that is not fair, that is not wise, that is not graceful, that is not healthy, that somehow there's something wrong with it. And even if it's technically correct, to learn things and to clean your room and to brush your teeth, and to eat vegetables, things that are technically correct, they're usually forced upon the child incorrectly, and that becomes an injustice. If the child is nagged, pressured, bribed, punished, then it's an injustice. And so the child is forced to submit to injustice and craziness. I mean, look at the world right now. Look at the craziness that's going on. And it's always been that way. I mean, you go back through history, there's always been some brand of craziness that overtakes societies. And most people submit to it. See, they're intimidated by it. They go along with it for some reason, either because they're afraid or because they're totally hypnotized to the authority, or because they see some advantage to themselves, so they go along with it. And so the ones who can see clearly, the kids who can see clearly that it's unjust or that it's weird. See, a lot of cultures, most cultures have weird things, weird customs. I mean, you can imagine a kid that's growing up in a cannibal culture, for example. Well, there's a lot of weirdness around the world. Weird. The kids, it's weird, but they're forced to conform. And so they do. But they are now subject to it. When you conform to something without rhyme, that you're forced to do without rhyme or reason, without understanding. See, everything should have understanding with it. So little kids, yes, you brush your teeth, but not with pressure. See, because if you pressure the child, then they conform to your pressure, which is an injustice and which is wrong and which is hypnotic. If you bribe the child, then once again, it's it's hypnotic, and it's wrong, and it's an injustice, and it's not fair, and it doesn't help the child. But if you just keep reminding the child, then one day the child sees the reason for brushing the teeth, then it's theirs. See, there's no injustice, and there's understanding accompanying it. But anytime you're forced to do something without rhyme or reason, anytime that you are pressured and you give in to the pressure, anytime there's something weird and you have to do the weird thing, you either have to keep seeing that it's weird, keep seeing that it's goofy, keep seeing that it's wrong, keep seeing that it's unjust. And you see it, but then what? They see you watching them. They see you seeing it. And so then they don't like that because it exposes them. In the innocent, bright eyes of a child, the parent sometimes is filled with rage because they're forced to look at their own craziness, their own wrongness, their own impatience. So they try to put your lights out. And most kids have their lights put out. They get put down, slapped around, rejected. And various manipulative techniques are used upon them so that they submit. And their lights go out. And that's what happens to most of us. Our lights go out. And then we wander through life in this hypnotic state. See, once you're hypnotized, so if you're forced to do this without rhyme or reason, if you're pressured to do that, if you're bribed to do this, if you're scared to do that, if you're threatened to do this, if you're manipulated to do that, if these and that pressures are put upon you and these and that goals, and you're sent into this environment, this wrong school environment, and this, you're handed over to pressure mongers, and they do all these things to you, and you go along with it, then sooner or later you become totally hypnotized by everything, because everything reminds you. You sit down to eat, and here comes the weird food, something weird, and you don't like it, and it's weird, and it's mushy, and it's gooey, and it smells awful, and they force you to eat it. Well, you submit, you're intimidated, and you eat it, then you become hypnotized. You understand? But some kids, they continue to see that it's weird, and they try to put their lights out, but they don't put their lights out. They hang on to that brightness. That's the way you have to be. And if your lights have been put out, then you just have to come back to the truth. Come out from under the subjugation. Come out from the hypnosis. Come out from the intimidation. Come out from doing things without rhyme or reason. Come out from doing weird things. And be objective and stand back like you were when you were a little child and you saw that there was injustice. Your dad was weak. Your mom was yelling at you and pushing you around, and your dad didn't say anything. And then they forced you to eat this weird stuff. And then they treated your brother better than you. It was injustice, and they sent you off to school, and you said, Mommy, it's scary. The teacher is really mean, and some of the other kids are bullies, and they sent you off anyway and didn't want to hear it. And then they forced you to do this and forced you to do all kinds of things. You saw it. You must return once again to that, where you see it. You see the craziness. You see the intimidation. You see the injustice. But here's the secret. Don't resent it. Because if you resent it, then you're back under the intimidation again. You're back in the hypnosis. See, any response, whether it's fear, anger, intimidation, resentment, hatred, anger. So there's the intimidation. There's the unjust person. There's somebody that looks like it. See, your mom used to push you around. She yelled at you with a high-pitched voice. And now you have a boss, and she has a high-pitched voice, and you feel uneasy and you feel anger. And I'll never forget one time. I was working at a place, and there was a guy there. He was you kind of liked the guy. He was his own person. But he had a little bit of a drinking problem. You know why? He was angry. Well, one day, and we had a dispatcher. We had a couple of dispatchers. One of them was a lady. And she seemed like a rather decent person to me, but she had to be bossy. You know, sometimes dispatchers, they have to be really, really bossy. They have to be kind of bossy and dictatorial. I mean, you have to do this, you got to do that, you got to go do this, you got to do that. Anyway, this guy I was talking about, he came into the locker room, and he started throwing stuff around, and he started swearing, And he said, I'm not going to work for a... And he used the B word like that. She had told him to do something, and it made him angry. Why? Because probably when he was a kid, that's what his mom did. She bossed him around. He hated his mom. And now, when this lady bosses him around, it's the same as if his mom was doing it. Do you understand? But he's still reacting to it, so he's still intimidated by it. He's still subject to it. Yeah, he may rebel against it. See, the injustice, the cruelty, the pressure, the phoniness, the weirdness. Yeah, some kids rebel against it. They see it's weird and they rebel. They see it's phony, they rebel. They see it's hypocritical and they rebel. See? Well, those are actually the better ones. They see that something's wrong with it and they don't want to submit. So they rebel. But the problem is they rebel angrily, resentfully. Then usually because of the guilt for the anger and the resentment, then usually they end up having alcohol problems or drug problems. See what I mean? I'll never forget. When I was a kid, we had I'm laughing. We had a minister. I was actually a teenager at the time. And, we would go to church. And he was like a typical minister. I mean, he was nice and smiling. And he was so, it's a wonderful day. And, it was just like that, right? And his wife was, in charge of the choir and so everything was nice. And you know what? Their daughter ran off and got pregnant and got involved with some no good type of guy. Total rebel. But you know what? I understand it because she lived with them and she saw the hypocrisy. She saw the phoniness. And she hated, that was her mistake. She hated it. So she rebelled against it. All right, so she rebelled. But she can still be okay if she sees that the anger and the resentment is wrong. Especially the resentment. Okay, the anger is there, but if she lets go of the resentment, then the anger will go away too. So what does the pressure do? What does the weirdness do? See, so what happens then? Kids rebel against their weird parents, and they go off, but then what? They rebel and they find something even weirder to do to rebel against their parents. You see what I mean? But then there are the conformists. Then there are the conformists who submit and go along and are hypnotized. And they do it because, first of all, they're totally bamboozled by the mom or something. They worship the ground that she walks on. But also because of the perks. They want the approval. They want to be, they want to get the approval of that authority. So they become bootlickers. You've heard that term, bootlickers? That's right. They grovel and they serve and they lick boots. And one day they become the very good, person who works for Hitler. They become in charge of the Nazi death camp, going about their duty. They become the bureaucrat, doing their duty, signing the papers, carrying out orders. See what I mean? And for that they get peace, and they get approval, and they get perks. See? So you got rebels and conformists. So you have to find a way to get beyond. You don't want to be a conformist to the craziness, to the wrongness. But on the other hand, you don't want to be an angry rebel. You just look bad, you get yourself in trouble, and you end up with a heart attack. See, the conformists and the ones who inherit the mantle, who become the martyr mother or the worshipped mother. They pick up the mantle themselves, and then they become their mother. Well, they get cancer. And the guy that rebels and goes off and smokes cigarettes and drinks and so on, he probably ends up with a heart attack. He might get cancer too because he took in the identity of his wife, see. But you got the idea. Conformists and rebels. You have to find a way to be beyond it, to creatively rebel. Like Jesus, for example. He was a good guy. And he rebelled against what? The hypocrisy, the phoniness, the plasticness, the pressure, the rules and regulations, and the bureaucrats, of, religious bureaucrats. He rebelled, but he did so creatively. But he said, don't be subject to that anymore. Don't react to it. Don't respond to it. Don't believe it. Don't disbelieve it. Don't be intimidated by it. Don't be angered. Nothing. Nothing. You just see it. But you belong to another kingdom. The kingdom of God. It's a different state of mind. And you are subject. Yes, you become subject. But you become subject to the good king. I'll never forget. There was a movie a long time ago. It was the original Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. He was the star. Errol Flynn was his name. You got to see the movie if you haven't. It's an old movie made a long time ago. Don't watch the remakes. Don't watch any of the remakes because it's never as good. Watch the original one. And the King of England was off on the Crusades or something, and Robin Hood was there. And there was government bureaucrats, the evil sheriff of Nottingham or whatever he was. Total hypocrite, totally phony, totally vicious and dictatorial. And they were doing bad things while the good king was gone. The good king was gone, and while he was gone, all these bad guys took over. Well, Robin Hood rebelled against them. And if he took something from them, then he gave it to the poor. See, he protected the poor, and he loved the poor, the victims of this dictatorial cruelty. But he was a total rebel, he was. But he was, a really cool guy. He had a lot of courage, a lot of guts. And he spoke up for himself. Of course, the evil sheriff of Nottingham didn't like him. But too bad. Robin Hood was his own man, his own person. That's the way you have to be. Christ was his own person too, But anyway, here's the beautiful scene. The good king comes back. But he's heard that there's some bad things going on. So he puts on this dark brown robe and pretends he's a monk. Puts a hood, robe with the big robe around his waist and a hood over his head. And he goes around and he pretends just to be this monk so he can go around and talk to people and find out what's going on before he acts. Well, he encounters Robin Hood is heading one way and the good king, looking like a monk, is going the other way, and they encounter each other, and then I forget how it all comes to pass. But then suddenly the king takes off his the hood from his head, and Robin sees that he's the king. And Robin Hood gets down on one knee and says, "My king and my lord." See, Robin Hood submits to the good king because he loves good. He loves what's right. He loves justice. He won't submit to the evil sheriff of Nottingham. He thumbs his nose at the evil sheriff of Nottingham, but he submits to the good king. So that's the way you have to be. And who is the good king? Well, it's God, of course, and his son, Christ. The good king. Submit to them and come out of the hypnosis. Come out of it. Don't resent people. Don't hate them. Don't be angered by them. Don't judge them. Just watch. Almost as if you were in your own little world, and like you were when you were a little child. Remember when you were a little child? And you sat on, I use this example so often, but I like it. You're sitting in the back seat of the car, and mommy and daddy are up in the front, and they're going somewhere, and you're a little tiny child. And you look out the window, and you see the stars and in the sky, and you see the lights, and you see the beautiful, or the sunlight, and you see dogs and birds and people and bridges and restaurants and all kinds of really cool stuff. And you just watch. And then your mommy and daddy are talking, and daddy says something, and mommy says something, and daddy says something, and mommy says something. It's like you're watching a tennis game. You just watch. That's all. Doesn't bother you, doesn't affect you. You have to learn how to be that way. And how do you become that way? How do you come back from the hypnosis and become that way? Well, you have to want to, of course. You have to yearn for what's good and what's true, for the good king, the Father you've never known. And then with the meditation is very helpful. It helps you to stand back from thought, because see, all the bad things in the past, all of the intimidations and all the weirdness and all the wrong and all the pressures, they all got internalized, and you have to stand back from your thoughts and just watch them. And then go out in the world and see all the craziness. But then you know what? Then you'll also see the good. You'll see the sweetness of children, and you'll see goodness in people. You'll see things as they are. It'll be like a whole new life. It's beautiful.